We're back.
We're back. It's been a while, and people are starting to panic on Twitter and social media. I got a lot of panicky emails and tweets, and we're a big part of people's lives. And when we go away for a week, it's not good. So
it feels like it's been a long time since we did this, especially because the last couple we did, I was in Arizona for the owners meeting. So this is like a normal podcast again. I forget how to do it.
I think it'll come back to you pretty quick.
You think so?
I don't think we ever knew how to do it, so we'll just keep doing what we do. But
we set the bar pretty low.
We're back. We're back for good. We'll take you right through the off season. We got the draft coming up. We got the schedule release coming up, which is always fun. And then we got OTAs. Before you know it, it'll be training camp. So we're not going to go away again.
Well, we can't promise that,
well,
but we'll tell you.
I'm trying to make everyone feel better.
This is the Eagle Eye Podcast. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, I am like running on fumes right now, but that's good because it's like right before you crash, you have like that last little burst of energy. I'm in that area right now.
Yeah, you've had quite a couple days travel-wise.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this on one of our pods before we took our little break. I stayed out in Arizona and Utah. I did a little road trip after the owners meetings, and I was supposed to come back on Wednesday night, and then my flight got delayed 13 hours to the next morning. So
that's not really a flight being delayed. That's a flight being canceled and taking a different flight.
Yeah, kind of. And look, it sucks, but the people are really nice about it. It's not their fault. So you try to like remember that when you're in the customer service line, not to like lose it on these people who are trying to do their jobs. But it was a little frustrating, especially like I'd been there for, I was trying to leave. I was ready to come home, but.
And people don't know this, but you actually were hiking with Jeff Lurie for a few days and up in the mountains. And how was that? Oh no.
No, Jeff Lurie. It was fun though. It was a great trip. It was like a lot of the things I had seen before, but it had been so many years. Like I was a kid, my parents took me to like the Grand Canyon and Zion National Park. So like I was able to do those things. I went to Capitol Reef National Park, crossed off my final Utah National Park. It was all really fun.
Zion's a great place. It's always hurt though.
Oh, God. That took me a second. Can I show you a couple quick photos?
Yeah, photo time.
Yeah. And if you don't,
that's what we're going to do on this podcast is look at Dave's vacation.
Yeah, it might be. If you don't want this, like fast forward, we'll talk about Marcus Mariota in a few minutes. But this is the Grand Canyon.
I recognize it from the big.
Yeah, it's grand. They when they named it, they got it right. I'll tell them that. It was crazy this morning. It was snowing a ton, and you couldn't even see into the canyon. And I was hiking into it. And then once I got on the hike, it started to clear out, and it was beautiful.
Well, the top is at like 8,000 feet up.
Yeah, well, I didn't go all the way down.
No, I'm just saying, like as soon as you start going down, it gets a lot warmer. That's the mistake people make is they overdress.
Yeah,
when they go down the South Rim Trail. Now, did you get to the North Rim at all, or you just South Rim?
No, the North Rim's closed right now. Inaccessible because of snow. But yeah, it was beautiful to see the South Rim, and then headed up to Monument Valley.
Nice.
Did a little walk around in Monument Valley in Navajo land up there. So that was cool. Then went to Capitol Reef, saw this cool arch, hiked around it, drove out to the Temple of the Sun, which was really cool, and then finished up the trip in Zion.
Dave's got like a slideshow prepared.
I know, this is nice. I feel like I'm like in school, like this is show and tell. And this was in Zion. It snowed. It was beautiful. Hopefully that's the last snow I see for a while, though.
I think so, yeah.
That's it.
Good stuff.
It was fun. It was a whirlwind trip, but I'm glad to be back. And we have some football stuff to talk about. A few things have happened. The Eagles signed a guy since we last spoke. Marcus Mariota talked to reporters for the first time in Philly. And Howie Roseman was on Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce's New Heights podcast, and it was a really interesting interview. So we wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. If you haven't listened to that, maybe pause this, go listen to that, or listen to it later. I think it's worth your time. But Rube, the new player, we just have to call him Street, right?
Yeah, he said it's kind of like Slay. Slay's a little more adamant about it. He doesn't want anyone calling him Darius. Street's explanation was Kentavius, he said, has too much margin for error. He's, he said Street's just simple. You can do a lot with Street. It's very pliable. People call him, street team, street legal, street money. He said Kentavius has too many moving parts. So we got two guys that we're calling by their last names. I think it's a trend that could pick up some steam.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah, but with you, it doesn't work because you have two first names.
Right. Or two last names. But I think in the locker room, I think maybe by the end of the year, the whole team will be, hey, Opeta. You never know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about who that would be the toughest.
There's no more to say, hey, Hurts.
That'd be weird.
Yeah. Because that's a word. But yeah, it was good to talk to him. Great personality. It was a fun talk. He talked about what a big Trent Cole fan he was growing up as a kid, which was funny. Went to the same high school as William Frizzell, the safety on the Eagles, for like 7 years, from like 86 to the early 90s.
He was in high school that long?
Pardon me?
He was in high school that long?
No, he's 10 to the same. That's when he played for the Eagles, but they weren't there at the same time. But he was William Frizzell was a guy the Eagles had joint practices with the Lions, and Frizzell was on the Lions, and he got cut, and Buddy signed him, and he was asked, why did you sign him? He said, well, when we had joint practices with the Lions, he was the only guy that fought back. And he ended up having a nice career here as a safety. But anyway, yes, he's a versatile guy. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's mainly an interior guy. And he understands his role. He's not going to be a starter here. He's going to be one of many defensive linemen if he makes the team, like all these guys. 1-year contracts, no guarantees of anything. You got to make the team first and then figure out what your role is. Every single guy they've signed is a 1-year deal, and every outside guy. And you see where they fit in. But he's a decent little player, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and we were at the owners' meetings, and Howie Roseman was asked about defensive tackle and how he felt about it, and he went through the thing saying, yeah, we like the guys we have, but he also said, but we're not. I mean, this roster is not a final product. So he kind of tipped his hand a little bit. And it was a spot where they needed some depth. I mean, you say, all right, they lost Javon Hargrave, but then you look around and you're like, all right, the 3 starters, pretty solid. I think you feel good with Jordan Davis. You feel good with Fletcher Cox. And you feel good with Milton Williams. But you also lost Linval Joseph. You also lost Ndamukong Suh. And all of a sudden, it was looking a little weak on the inside. So now you add Street to a group that includes Marlon Tuipulotu and Marvin Wilson and maybe Noah Ellis if he's healed at some point. So you have some bodies there, and I don't think they're done yet. I mean, I think that's a position where I wouldn't be surprised to see them draft even in an early round.
Yeah, and I think Street's a guy who throughout his career, when he's been healthy, he's been a 25 snap guy, and I could see him in that role, maybe a little less. We'll see how it all works out, but he's a guy who can give you 15 to 20 solid snaps a game. And
if you bump up Milton this year, then he could kind of take that Milton role.
Yeah, the Milton role. Yeah, and we'll see how it all plays out. At some point, Fletcher's going to not be Fletcher anymore. I mean, he had a little bounce back year, I guess a significant bounce back year last year, but I still worry about him being – a guy you can put out there for 30, 35 snaps and get consistent play just because of his age. And because in the big picture, he has declined, even though last year was a little bounce back. So I'm a little concerned about him. But if he plays the way he did last year, then you feel good about him.
Yeah, and look, if he's an average starter, it's always weird when a guy was great and then they kind of regress to being – good or even average. It feels weird to watch them do it, but if he's an average player, they're paying him $7 million. That's about the going rate for a slightly above average starting defensive tackle. So if you look at him and you forget his name for a second, you think, okay, that makes sense. But it is tough to watch a guy we saw really dominate the league for a long time not be as dominant. But I think he can still play a little bit.
Yeah, well, he was fine last year, and yeah, we'll see.
Milton Williams could be a really big part of that position. And I think you're with me on I really like Milton. I think he's got a lot of talent. But there's a big jump when you go from being the first guy off the bench and you're in a rotational role, and now you're a starter and you're expected to play not double the snaps that you were playing before, but a significant amount more. Can you be as effective as you once were in those limited snaps, and can you kind of extrapolate that to a bigger role? I think he can, but you never really know. And he goes so hard too. I think that was what made him so good in that rotational role. Is he'll play to the whistle. He'll chase down every carrier. Can he do that if he plays 40 snaps? I think so, but I don't know.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same thing facing like Reed Blankenship, although his snaps are all kind of in 5 games. I think Marcus Epps was a guy that we wondered about that last year. Could he make that jump? He did, but not. I don't think I think his play suffered. I think he didn't play consistently as well as a full-time player as he did as a part-time player. You really don't know how guys are going to respond to that jump. But I really like Milton. I like his game. I like his effort. He's definitely got some life to his game, and he's gotten better each year, and I expect that to continue.
Yeah, I do too. And then the other position, it kind of is we'll see what this defense looks like under Desai, but under Gannon, that nose tackle spot was different than the other defensive tackle spots. And right now, I don't know if they have a backup nose. I mean, maybe Tui Pelotu. We saw them do it one game with Marvin Wilson that didn't go well. They put him in a really unfair spot. Noah Ellis, we've never seen play in the NFL, but he has the body type to do it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all falls into place. I'm curious about it. But I think you're right that they're not done at that position.
Jalen Carter?
Stranger things have happened.
We don't have to get into the Jalen Carter discussion at length here, but they're doing their homework, aren't they? You would think.
Yeah, and look, I know he had a bad pro day. He's been through a lot. And I'm not going to sit here and say he's a bad guy. I mean, he didn't kill people. He was racing someone who died, not defending him. But sometimes the headlines look a lot worse than what happened. The poor people that were killed were in a different car. He shouldn't have been doing it. But I think, as an organization, you do your due diligence. I know he had a bad pro day. I don't really care about that. I look at the film and he's a wrecking machine, and that's probably a poor choice of words. He's a really, really talented guy. And I would put his film above everything. I think if you have a chance to get him, in 6 months when he's playing for you, 8 months, whatever it is, nobody's going to be talking about his pro day. I mean, once he gets in, if he's here, he's got 2 former teammates that he's friends with that could keep an eye out on him. And I guess what I'm saying is nothing I've seen would disqualify me from taking him at 10. If that's the way they want to go, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I don't think. Now, there might be stuff in his background that comes out that disqualifies him from that. I don't know. I think you trust Dom, who's going to do all the research on him and talk to his former teammates and his coaches and teachers and professors and all that. And I haven't seen any reason not to take him at 10.
Sure. Yeah, we'll see. I think there's the worry about the immaturity of not being forthcoming about everything. I think that worries you almost as much as anything else, but we'll see. And as far as the player, I mean, I remember when the Eagles drafted Jordan Davis, I started watching Jordan Davis, and all you saw was this kid. Like, you're thinking, man, they can get him in a year, and you're thinking, ha ha ha, no way, they'll be in a position to draft him. And look, I still don't know where he's going to go. I still have a hard time believing he's going to be there at 10. But we've seen the Eagles' MO. I mean, if there's a player out there they like and that player drops into their range, they're pretty aggressive, whether it's Jordan Davis last year, whether it's Andre Dillard in, 19?
Yeah.
They'll make their move and they'll go get their guy. And I know that, like, they could trade back and get more picks. They can still do that, but they have a pretty good roster. So if there's a guy that they want to target, they have the ammo to go do it.
Yeah, there's no question. And they do have a good roster, but they also have a lot of guys whose contracts are up after this year. So I think there is value to adding picks. But you're right. I mean, he might be the best player in the draft. He might turn out to be the best player in the draft. And if he starts drifting because of a bad pro day or questions about his character, and you feel good about who he is and where he is physically, yeah, I would. And if you think he's going to drift to 10, you take him. If you think he's going to be close to there, you see what it would take to move up. But I mean, in 5 years, nobody's going to be talking about the issues that he had in the spring of 2023. I believe.
Yeah, I don't know.
You never know.
Yeah, but it is fascinating to think about him on this team. Like if you have to recreate one unit in college football in the last few years, recreating the Georgia defense is a pretty good start.
Yeah, you can't go wrong there.
Marcus Mariota. Don't have a segue here. Just Marcus Mariota. He talked to reporters.
It's kind of like that Oregon offense under Chip Kelly.
I was going to make a joke about trading up to get Mariota. I thought,
Yeah.
He didn't want to talk about it, so why should I?
Yeah, it was weird. I actually had the first question in the Mariota Zoom call. I just wish we could meet these guys in person and meet them in the auditorium, but it was a Zoom call, and I asked him, what did he think in the spring of 15 when, obviously Chip was here, needed a quarterback. It would have been difficult to get up from where they were to where he was going to go, but
big jump.
It's a big jump. But what did he think? Did he think he was coming here? Did he have a sense of how bad Chip wanted him? And he didn't bite at all. He's like, yeah, I was happy to go to Tennessee. They gave me a great opportunity. Just like the Raiders did and the Falcons did. It was like, come on. And then Jeff McClain tried again, basically, repackaged the question and asked him again, and he didn't bite again. So for whatever reason, he didn't want to talk about Chip, didn't want to talk about the 15 draft. But he was good talking about some other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's lived a lot of life, played a lot of football since then. So I get it.
Yeah.
I wonder, though, if he's aware of just how big of a deal that was in this city. Do you think he knows that? Because it's hard to – if you weren't here living in the Philly area during that 2015 draft, it's hard to imagine. It was the only sports conversation. It was the biggest thing everyone was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And
do you think he's aware of that part?
I think he is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even the way I phrased my question, I was told, I said, I kind of indicated that, but he has to know. Yeah.
Okay.
So
what'd you make of him other than that?
Yeah.
Interesting guy.
Yeah, he is. And it's unusual to get a backup who's a second pick in a draft. A lot of times the second pick in the draft doesn't want to be a backup. And I'm thinking about two guys that the Eagles drafted that, Donovan had no desire. Like when it didn't work out in Washington and Minnesota, I mean, he could have extended his career, but he said, I don't want to be a backup. If I'm not going to be a starter, I'm retiring. And he did. He was young. I mean, was he 30, 32, 33?
33, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And the guy in Indy, it was 3 teams ago. Maybe I should call him by his name. Carson, I don't know what his future is. Maybe he'll get a job, but doesn't really seem to me to be a guy that's wired to be a backup. But Mariota does. And he said, I've been a starter. I've been benched. I've been cut. I've won playoff games. I've experienced all the extremes, and right now I just want to be on a winning team and have fun and play, and have fun playing football, being on a football team. And I really believe. I mean, you never hear any questions about his character. He's not a guy that is going to be political as some backup quarterbacks can be, even good ones, especially good ones, I guess. And we've seen that a lot over the years. I think he genuinely feels like he has a lot to contribute to Jalen, to the offense. And he wasn't shy about saying, I can help make Jalen a better player. So he knows that's his role. He said, I asked him about being a starter in the future, and he said, I still think I can be that, but right now my job is to help this team any way that Nick Sirianni asked me to, and I'm okay with that. And I kind of believe him.
Yeah, it is funny because you think about one of Nick Sirianni's biggest themes, one of the things he talks to his players about so much is embracing their role. I don't know if there's a position on the team that the role changes so much between starter and backup. Right? Because the starting quarterback is a leader, whether you want him to be or not. He's a leader on the team. He's the man. And the backup really has to then be completely behind the scenes in a lot of ways. Because you don't want, honestly, like you think back to like Jalen being the backup. I don't think Jalen was a very good backup, right?
And it was by no fault of his own.
Exactly.
I mean, he was just being himself. And Carson could try to be a leader, but it's not in his DNA. And Jalen could try to not be a leader, but that's not in his DNA. So you have two quarterbacks, and one guys just naturally gravitate toward him because of the way he practices and his personality and his unselfishness and his team first mentality and his ability to, be genuine with guys on offense and defense. And the other guy, just his personality didn't draw people toward him. So you have this backup who's not playing, who's a rookie, who's 22 and is a natural leader. And you have this veteran first-round pick, second pick in the draft, who isn't. And that created problems. And that's one of the big reasons. I'm one of the reasons he's not here anymore. But Jalen's also better, which is a big part of it too. But yeah, I think that's kind of how it started. Jalen wasn't trying to go out and supplant Carson as a leader. It happened organically.
Yeah. And I think you have to, even like Gardner, when he was here, he handled it the right way. I think he wasn't like, and it's funny to even think about it now because Jalen's so good, but it wasn't crazy when Gardner went to Nick after that Jets game a couple years ago and said, "Hey, can I win this job?" And by all accounts, he did it the right way. Like he asked, which, hey, no harm in asking. Nick told him to get lost nicely, but I don't think Mariota is going to do that. So I think it's a good spot, and the experience matters. I think like having someone who has seen a lot of football and we talk so much about the offense not changing with a similar style quarterback, and I don't want to minimize Jalen's skills because he's way more skilled of a runner than Mariota, but like that part of it doesn't change for the play caller or the head coach who's the offensive guy. Like that part doesn't change, and that's good. But I also think it helps to have Mariota have a similar skill set to Jalen to then help him see things that maybe Gardner Minshew couldn't because they're different style players. So I think there's an added benefit to Hurts, not just the offense.
I do think Mariota is Hurts equal as a runner. He's a really good runner.
Well, I mean, he never did it like Jalen.
I think he had almost as many rushing yards last year as Jalen I think he only started 13 games. I mean, he had like a 74-yard run as a rookie, but no, he didn't do it as much. I mean, he's got a higher career average. Jalen's more of a weapon at the goal line. He's more of a weapon than anybody at the goal line. But yeah, but I mean, he's obviously not as accomplished in any area as Jalen. But
so Mariota in 13 games went for 438 and 4 touchdowns last year on the ground. So, I mean, yeah, good, but not Jalen numbers.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, it's not a big deal. But but I do think that's a good point. I think he can see the game the same way as Jalen and understand defenses the same way because of their similarities and the way they play the game.
I also thought him talking about Alex Tanney was interesting. They were teammates for several years in Tennessee, and Tanney's still a pretty young guy. I thought it was kind of fun hearing Mariota talk about Alex Tanney like that. He's like, he's not ready to call him coach yet, but he also said like he saw this coming. This isn't a surprise to him that Tanney's in this chair.
Yeah, I think everyone who's been around Tanney says that. He's just one of those guys who kind of exuded coaching before he was, while he was still a player. You can just tell. I think was it Steichen who was it who said the same thing? But I think it was Steichen. Yeah, it was. It's kind of cool. I mean, to have a former teammate be your coach it's got to be a little weird.
It happens though.
Yeah, it does happen. It happens a lot. And he did say that. I mean, he's got relationships with a lot of people. He actually met with Sirianni during the pre-draft process out in Eugene. He was with the Chargers at that point, so they've known each other. So there's a lot of reason to feel pretty good about this. And he wasn't awful for the Falcons last year. He wasn't great, but I think the thing about Mariota as a backup is that I think he really understands the role. I don't think he's going to go out there if he has to play and try to do too much and try to prove like I'm a starter. I can play. He'll run the offense. He'll call the plays. He'll run the plays that are called, and he won't try to do too much. He won't try to be Superman because I think there's a natural tendency, and I think there might have been a little of this with Minshew, of I want to be a starter. This is my chance to prove I can still do it. But I don't think you can go into it that way. You have to really I'm just going to go play the game. And
yeah, the one thing where Mario does worry a little bit is he has turned the ball over a lot in his career. And that's like typically something you don't want from your backup.
Right.
You'd rather have like the safe option. But overall, like that feels nitpicky because I think he's one of the better backups in the league.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in a great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. The Howie Roseman interview on the New Heights podcast with Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce, even though it's just Jason doing the interview, really fascinating stuff. Howie opened up like we don't really hear him do very much anymore.
Or ever.
Yeah. I was thinking back, like, has he ever talked like this? When he used to have his radio show, there would be times where he'd tell stories and he'd get into it. But that was a lot of years ago at this point.
Yeah, and there's a lot more to talk about now. A lot like, he's got more of a, there's been 2 Super Bowl trips, 2 Super Bowl teams, championship, his demotion in 2015, which he's gotten to be really like funny about it. Remember, I was in the closet. What's that?
Yeah, that was one part that he joked about that.
He did. Closet, remember? It was really revealing. I mean, Kelce got him at ease, got him comfortable, and how he just opened up. To me, there was so much that was interesting in there, but to me, the most interesting, and it was on last week's New Heights, and it starts right about almost exactly an hour into the pod. But man, I thought ours were long. They're going like 2.5 hours. But to me, the most interesting and revealing thing was just talking about his roster building process and just how he sees that and how he approaches it, and how his methodology has changed over the years, what he's learned, how he's grown, which he's clearly done as a GM. And I mean, he talked about that for like 20 minutes. It was probably the most detailed, revealing look at his roster building process that he's ever given. I mean, and part of the problem is like when we interview him, there's like 20 of us and there's one of him, and the questions come at him, and there's no theme. We have limited amount of time, and so I have
And
what
there's
I want to
normally
ask.
like news to discuss with him, whereas this wasn't like news.
Yeah, but there's also never any thread to our conversations because I have my questions, and Elliot has his, and then Tim McManus has his, and Chris Franklin has his, and so you get like answers about something that are interesting and okay, and you can write about them. But this was a chance for him to, with no time limit and only Jason in the room with him. It was that they did it at the combine in Indy last month or in February, but it was a whole different format that you never see him in, and it really allowed him to kind of just sit back and relax and spread out and just answer with great detail and very thoughtful. And he was just at ease. And so it was just a fun listen. I mean, if you're an Eagles fan, there's probably more in that hour that you can learn about the franchise and where it is and how it got there than anywhere else. It was that revealing.
Yeah, you told me about it, and I think I listened to it on one of my long drives. And it didn't kill enough time, honestly. I had some long drives. The roster building stuff was fascinating, and he admitted something that we've known about him for a long time and about this franchise is that they try to gain edges by zigging when other teams zag, and that was the phrase he used, or maybe vice versa. I don't remember. But that's something that, like, watching them from afar, you see it, and you wonder how intentional it is. Like, is it something where no, we think this is the best way to do this. We don't care what other teams are doing because we want to do it this way. We want to value this position at this level, but it's more intentional than that. And that was kind of what I've always suspected is that the organization is always trying to gain advantages over other organizations. And the way you do that is you see, what are they doing? How can we do it more efficiently? How can we change our valuation on positions or players to alter that and to get any advantage you can? Because in a league with a salary cap with 32 teams, it's tough. Like it's really tough. So any little advantage you can get, and some of them they're really upfront about, like building through the trenches, and others they're not as upfront about. And sometimes it takes a while to break it out of them.
Yeah, and he talked about trying to be on the, I guess, riding the wave on whatever trends and just being ahead of the league.
And that's a very Jeffrey Lurie headed initiative. That's organizational. That's not Howie. We always talk about Howie speaking the same language as Jeff Lurie. That right there is what we're talking about.
No question. Yeah, no question about it. But I think it's now their philosophy. Where I don't think it's really Howie following Jeffrey. I think it's just a shared vision. I mean, they've been together for, almost a quarter of a century, not as GM and owner, but I mean, how many employees of the franchise, how many employees have been there longer than Howie?
When Troy get there?
Maybe Troy. Not many.
Yeah, not many.
Maybe there's, somebody in sales or accounting. I mean, even Don Smolenski, it was there and they left, I think, and came back. I don't know. TJ Paganetti has been here quite a while.
When you add all the Paganettis together, they longer than Howie.
Another one of Marcus Mariota's college teammates, TJ Paganetti. So I think they really have a shared vision now, and it's funny because I was, and I think that comes through in that interview because you kind of, I mean, you're right. You hear the same things coming from both of them. Who do you think's Who do you think? I mean, if you made a list of the most important people in Eagles history, Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman would be like in the top 5.
Yeah.
I mean,
you could. Now, I'm not as much of a historian as you are, but I mean, the best owner in franchise history and the GM delivered a Super Bowl. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know how you compare. Like, I mean, Burt Bell. You know, the Eagles were on the auction block, and Burt Bell was the only bidder. I mean, that's how close they were to not existing. So he's probably got to be up there. Burt Bell bought the team.
I can't argue that. Yeah.
And I was bummed because after he bid on the team and at the auction and was awarded it, he didn't do an interview either. He did a Zoom call. I was really bummed. You knew where you knew where I was going. Yeah, I mean, Andy Reid, Jeff Lurie, Howie Roseman, Burt Bell, and I don't know.
It's almost like players don't have a long enough shelf life to make it.
Yeah, I mean, you could say Reggie White, but I mean, they didn't win anything when he was here. Won one playoff game. It's really been, I mean,
I think you almost have to separate players and non-players.
Yeah, I think it would be 5 players. I mean, 5 non-players. It would have to be if you made that list. There's no one player. I mean, Nick Foles would be the only possible guy.
No.
The guy started 20 games here. So anyway, we're off topic, but really recommend the interview. And
just I think I'm curious, where would you put Andy in relation to Howie?
Where I put Andy in relation to Howie? Yeah. I think Howie learned more from Andy. Like without Andy, none of this other stuff happens.
That's fair.
Howie's made more of an immediate impact, but as far as kind of creating the modern Eagles franchise, that was Andy Reid.
Yeah, I always think about it that way. And it's funny because we're going to talk about draft philosophy in a little bit. And I looked at like which positions they've drafted in the first round. And I started it with 1999 because like that's when the modern era of Eagles football began.
Yeah, but the whole lineman thing goes back before then. Like 98 was
Trey.
97 was 96 was Jermaine Mayberry, a guard tackle. 98 was offensive lineman. 97, what year was John Harris? Was he 97? 95 was Mamula. So 94 was that Renfro. So they were drafting linemen, even throughout the 90s. Most of them weren't very good, but it's crazy the percentage of linemen, even a little before Andy. But anyway, that's off topic. We'll talk about that as the draft approaches. But yeah, I really can't recommend this interview more. If you're really into the, kind of going deep into Howie Roseman's mind, this is the best place to do it.
And it's a good reminder, too, because we're so used to Howie's story. It's kind of like Mailata, right? Like, we've been around this story that it almost doesn't even, like, register sometimes how amazing it is.
Yeah.
Howie's story is unbelievable. Like, this kid who bugged the hell out of NFL executives for years finally gets a chance and works his way up to being a GM and then becomes a really good GM. Like, that part of his story alone is amazing. And then you factor in 2015 and the resurrection and all that, like it really is an amazing story. And I think like we just kind of forget about how crazy it is because we're just near it all the time and it doesn't register as much, but it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, Banner, who was the guy with the Jets? I can't think of his name. He was who finally called Howie. He was director.
Was that Tannenbaum?
I don't think it was 10. I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. But Banner and one of the front office guys with the Jets would joke about these letters they would get from Howie, and they're like, this crazy guy just keeps writing us letters and then thanks us for the rejection letters like once a month. They would joke about it on the phone. And then the Jets guy I'm going to interview him and see what happens. And it's like, oh, this guy's pretty good. And I mean, so to go from that to a borderline Hall of Fame front office executive, that's one of the craziest stories in Eagles history.
It was Tannenbaum.
Okay.
Yeah. Got something right.
I was thinking it was Joe Douglas.
Yeah, Joe Douglas has got his own problems right now.
Yeah, he does.
Speaking of Howie, one thing he's never done is take a running back in the first round. Is there any chance that changes later this month?
I think there's a chance. The last running back the Eagles took in the first round was Keith Byers in '86 out of Ohio State. Was he 14th pick, 12th pick? And
12.
I should know that. I think Robinson he's an interesting guy because he's such a good receiver that he didn't catch a high volume of passes. Texas never throws the ball to the back.
Keith Byers was 10th.
He was 10th, yeah. They never thrown the ball to the backs, but I mean, he averaged like 14 yards a catch. And I think the reason Howie doesn't draft running backs is because the perceived short shelf life injuries, it's just not a value pick in the first round. But I started thinking about, like, if in the NFL, Robinson can be a 50 catch guy. And if he's averaging even 10 yards a catch, and he's so powerful and elusive. And you think, in theory, backs coming out of the backfield and catching the ball aren't taking the beating, the pounding that they do as a runner. So maybe they look at him as a guy who can be a real combo guy, like 12 carries and 6 catches, 14 carries. And it does not necessarily have to be a 20, 22 carry guy where you would think you'd have a limited shelf life, and maybe get 5 healthy years out of him if you use him a lot as a receiver, which he seems to have the traits to do it and to be able to be a big play guy as a receiver. So maybe that'll factor into it. I still think it's a long shot. I think we'll find out if we'll find out a lot about Howie and his philosophy. Like, if he doesn't take this kid, he'll never take a running back. I mean,
well, I think back to 17, they had the 14th pick. If Christian McCaffrey got to them, they were probably going to take him. He didn't get that far. He didn't make it out of the top 10, and it would have been a big jump. I think the Eagles would have taken him. I don't know if they would have traded up to take him, because then you're like compounding.
And he's exactly why you don't take a running back in the first round. I mean, he's
McCaffrey?
Incredibly talented, but I mean, would that have been a good pick with his injuries?
Well, they drafted Derek Barnett, so.
Well, yeah, but that's not really my point.
Yeah, I think it would have been because if you can get 4 years out of a player, that's all you're getting on the rookie contract anyway. Like, ideally, yes, you want to draft these guys, you want to develop them, you want to keep them, you want to make them cornerstone pieces.
How many healthy years did McCaffrey have for the Panthers? 2? I'm just looking here. I mean,
yeah, but if you get a Christian McCaffrey in his prime on a team that just went to the Super Bowl, like, does that change the way you're doing things in the draft too? When you're this close, you think to getting back there, and with 2 picks in the first round, and that's the other thing we should talk about here, because there's a big difference between taking a running back or any of those positions that we generally think they value less than the line, basically, and receiver. Well, obviously, quarterback's in his own little category, but there's a big difference between 10 and 30. And I think they'd be much more likely at 30 to use use that pick on one of those secondary positions. Not secondary, but like,
I don't even that's not even the conversation to me. And 30 is, I think all the rules go out they could take anything at 30. But I'm kind of thinking about early in the first round.
But they haven't. I mean, they've been in the 20s and they haven't taken those other positions.
They've been in the mid-20s, yeah. And I'd have to go back and look at what the options were. I think Howie would take a running back at 30. I mean, if this kid falls to 30, he'll take him.
Yeah. Good luck.
The question is, if he's sitting there at 10, which could be.
I think he will be.
I think he will be. What do you do? I think he just might do it.
I still don't.
I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked.
I would be, honestly. I know how they do things, and if it's close at all between one of those positions and a lineman, they're going line.
Yeah, but I wonder if it would be close there at 10. I mean, I have to, without really knowing what they think of, there's not going to be an offensive lineman at 10, is there, who would make sense?
Sure. Skoronski could be there.
Yeah.
They're a good offensive. Now, that's not going to be a sexy pick. It's a pick where a lot of fans would go, ugh.
Yeah.
There'll be a worthy offensive lineman there at 10.
Yeah, worthy. I'm really curious. I kind of hope the situation presents itself to see what he does. Although, I mean, I don't think I think he's going to get out of 10. I just kind of feel like it, but.
You mean out of it, like lower?
No, higher.
I don't know what that means, though. Are we talking like higher into the top 10? Or
from 11?
Okay. That's a tricky thing. Yeah. I actually think there's a better chance of them moving up.
I mean, and nothing would surprise me, but I really want to see Robinson on the board to see what Howie does, because I think he might take him.
Okay, interesting. What do you make of their overall? Because I have the numbers in front of me, and I did it since '99. Like you mentioned, the linemen go before that, but you got to cut it off at some point.
Sure.
21 players in the first round, 9 defensive linemen, 5 receivers, 4 offensive linemen, 2 quarterbacks, 1 defensive back.
Yeah.
It tells you what they do.
And it works.
They've been a very successful franchise.
Why did they get to the Super Bowl last year? There were a lot of reasons. They had a good team, but they had the best D-line and one of the best O-lines. Andy recognized at a very early stage that was the way to build. He was really groundbreaking in that, and that's what Howie learned from. That's what Jeff Lurie learned from Andy, and they haven't stopped doing it. And as long as Howie's here, they're going to do it most of the time, if it makes sense. The 2 quarterbacks were both at number 2. Lito was like 20. Was he in the 20s?
I think so. I can find him real quick.
Yeah. 5 receivers, right?
Lito was 26.
He was 26. Yeah, I mean, it works. And I know it's not what fans want. Year after year, it's like Jermaine Mayberry, come on. But I mean, what percentage of those guys have been Pro Bowlers or, really good players?
Well, there've been some misses too, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's generally a pretty good track record.
Yeah. Yeah. And the misses have been spectacular misses. There's not a lot of in-betweens. They're not drafting good players. They're drafting studs or busts, basically. Yeah, they've had some spectacular misses, but it's a sound philosophy, and it's one that's not going to change as long as Howie's here. But I think there will be exceptions. There just haven't been very many.
Yeah, and I think I don't think a tie or close to a tie is good enough to go to one of those other positions. I think it has to be clearly like a special player, and the value at those other positions you care about more doesn't line up. Yeah. So I think it kind of takes a perfect storm for them to buck this trend. And we haven't seen it, but you're right. Like, I don't think you completely rule it out, because that situation could arise at some point.
And they might look at Robinson as a truly generational guy.
And they wouldn't be alone in that. I mean, Daniel Jeremiah, I think, has him as a top 4 or 5 player in this draft, and he's not alone in that. Like, Bijan Robinson's one of the best players in this draft, and it's just a matter of which team is going to pull the trigger and how much they value him, because the running back position is just what's happened to it value-wise in the last decade is pretty dramatic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, was Saquon, was he a good pick at Was he number 2 also, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's had 2 really, really good years out of 5. 2, one okay year, 1 non-existent year, and 1 bad year. I don't know.
But you also had bad teams drafting a running back. I think there's a difference when you're a good team. Like the Giants weren't good, and they weren't gonna be good, and they put a Ferrari out front of a shack. The Eagles are a really nice house. You have the nice house. You have the foundation. You don't have to build the foundation anymore. You can go ahead and put that Ferrari in the driveway, and it makes sense more that way.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. And that's why I can't wait to see what happens.
You got anything else here?
No. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
What was that?
I like that. All right, that's it. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. That's it for Rube. I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye. We'll talk to you soon.